That mountain lion's claws just ripped right through his skin as Jake slammed against the canyon wall. His blood was soaking right into the desert sand. Mason's got his gun out, but his hands are shaking something fierce. He can't take the shot without hitting the man he's gone and fallen for, the very sheriff who saved his life, the kind of forbidden love that could get them both killed. Now, before we get into the thick of it, do me a favor and comment where in the world y'all are watching from. And don't you forget to hit that subscribe button. The dust settled real slow out on that canyon floor, painting everything the color of old dried blood. 23 days. That's how long Daniel Crow had been on the trail of the man who ended his brother's life. 23 long days of following hoofprints through dusty alkali flats and over sharp stone that cut through boot leather like it held a personal grudge. 23 days of water rationed down to almost nothing and jerky so tough it'd crack a tooth. And now, standing there at the mouth of Redgate Canyon, he'd finally run him to ground. Except the fella waiting for him in the deep shadows of that cliff wall, well, he wasn't what Daniel expected at all. No, sir, not even close. That figure stepped out into the light, and Daniel's breath just got caught up somewhere in his throat. Massive, that was the only word that seemed to fit. The cowboy had to be a good 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block the sun, and arms as thick as cedar fence posts. His hat set down low, casting long shadows across a face that was all hard lines and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in some time. Dust covered him like a second skin, and every time he moved, you could see the pure power of his muscles shifting under his shirt in a way that made Daniel's mouth go bone dry. This wasn't the scrawny, wiry gunslinger Daniel had pictured in his head. This was something else entirely. Something that made his heart pound for reasons that had nothing to do with getting even. The giant's eyes found him from across the way, cold and blue as a sheet of winter ice. His voice rumbled out, low and deep, like thunder rolling across the empty plains. "You the one been following me, boy?" Boy, the word hit Daniel like a slap across the face. He was 22 years old, had survived 3 hard winters alone in Apache territory, and could track a shadow across bare rock. But standing there in front of this mountain of a man, he suddenly felt like the greenhorn kid he'd been trying so hard not to be. Daniel's hands started drifting toward his revolver, his fingers trembling, no matter how hard he tried to make them stop. "You killed my brother." The giant just tilted his head, studying Daniel like he was some curious little thing, but ultimately not important. "Is that a fact? What was his name?" "Thomas Crow." A long, heavy silence stretched out between them, broken only by the wind howling through the canyon. The giant's expression didn't change one bit. "Never killed a man named Crow." "You're lying." Daniel's voice cracked clean on that last word, betraying him. "My." The giant took one step forward, and Daniel stumbled back a step before he could even stop himself. A hot flush spread across his face. The giant saw it. Of course he saw it. A slow smile started to curve on that hard mouth, and it wasn't a kind one. "You sure you want to do this, boy? You're shaking so hard you couldn't hit me if I stood stock still and let you." And it was the truth. Daniel's whole body was trembling. It was adrenaline and fear, and something else too, something hot and strange coiling up in his gut like a snake. He had never felt anything quite like it. It felt like the big man's presence filled the whole dang canyon, pressing on Daniel's skin like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. "I've been tracking you in weeks." Daniel forced the words out through his clenched teeth. "You think I came all this way just to turn back?" The giant's smile widened, showing his teeth. "I think you came all this way because you were meant to." "I've been on your trail for weeks now." Daniel forced the words out, his jaw tight. "You think I came all this way just to turn tail and run?" The big man's smile widened, all teeth. "I reckon you came all this way because you didn't know what you were chasing, but you sure do now." He took another step closer, and this time Daniel held his ground, even though every part of him was screaming to turn tail and run. "So here's how this is going to play out. You're going to set that gun down real slow like, and then we're going to have us a talk about who really put your brother in the ground." Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. Up close, this giant of a man was something else entirely. His pure size making Daniel feel small and helpless, something he hadn't felt since he was just a kid. The smell of leather and honest sweat and something else, something you just couldn't put a name to, filled Daniel's head. His pulse was racing. His skin felt too tight. I ain't putting down a single thing till I get some answers. The giant's eyes narrowed, and faster than Daniel could follow, a huge hand shot out and snatched his wrist. The grip was pure iron, and there was no moving it. And the jolt of that touch, just skin on skin, sent a charge clear up Daniel's arm. His breath caught in his throat. The pistol dropped from his suddenly useless fingers. "There now," the big man said softly, his voice dropping low and dangerous. "Now we can talk like decent folk." But there was nothing decent about the way Daniel's own body reacted to that touch, to the heat pouring off the big man's massive frame, to the sheer presence of him. Daniel had never been this close to another fella, had never felt this kind of odd pull, like something was drawing him in, even while his good sense was yelling at him to back away. The big man's thumb pressed down on the inside of Daniel's wrist, right over where his pulse was pounding out of control. Them cold blue eyes glanced down to where they touched, and something flickered in him. Something that made Daniel's gut tighten up with a feeling he couldn't name. "You feel that?" The giant's voice was hardly more than a whisper now. "That hammering in your blood, that's fear. You ought to listen to it." But it wasn't just fear. Daniel knew fear well. He'd stared down rattlesnakes and mountain lions and men with killing in their eyes. This was something else. This was fear all mixed up with something hot and confusing. Something that made him feel every last inch of space between them. The way the giant's chest rose and fell with every breath, and the strength in them, fingers wrapped around his wrist. "Let me go." Daniel's voice came out hoarser than he meant it to, thick with something he wouldn't dare look at. "Not till you listen." And the big man pulled him closer, and all of a sudden there were just inches between their faces. Daniel could make out the faint scar over the giant's left eyebrow, the dark ring around those ice blue eyes, and the way his jaw was set like he was fighting some kind of war inside himself. "Your brother was killed by a man named Silas Kane. He's a tall, skinny fella with a scar clean across his throat. He's been setting other folks up for his dirty work for years. I've been on his trail just as long." Them words should have mattered. The news should have cut right through everything else. But all Daniel could think about was the heat coming off the giant's body, the way his own breath came fast and shallow, and the strange ache building up in his chest. "Why in the world should I believe a word you say?" The big man's grip got tighter, not to hurt him, but to command him, and his eyes drilled into Daniel's with a power that made the whole world fade away. "Because if I wanted you gone, boy, you'd already be in the dirt. I could snap you in two without even breaking the sweat." He leaned in close, his breath hot on Daniel's ear, and a shiver ran down Daniel's spine. "But I ain't fixing to hurt you. I'm gonna help you, whether you like it or not." The words were a promise and a threat, and all rolled into one, and they settled on Daniel like a hot brand. His head was just spinning. Nothing made a lick of sense anymore. Not the mission that had eaten him alive for near a month, not the anger that had driven him across half the territory, and sure as heck, not the way his own body was reacting to this man's closeness. The big fella let go of his wrist all of a sudden, and Daniel stumbled back, nearly hitting the dirt. His skin burned where them fingers had been. His heart just refused to slow down. And when he looked up to find them winter blue eyes still locked on him, Daniel realized with a jolt of pure terror that something deep down had just shifted. This wasn't about revenge no more. This was about something a whole lot more dangerous. Something Daniel didn't even have a name for. Something that scared him more than any gun or knife ever could. The big man picked up Daniel's revolver from where it fell in the dust, checked the cylinder, and then tucked it into his own belt. "Name's Jacob Stone, and you're coming with me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. And as Jacob turned and strode toward a black stallion tied up in the shadows, Daniel found his own feet moving without a thought, pulled along by some invisible rope he just couldn't break. The sun beat down something fierce on the canyon floor, but Daniel barely felt it. All he could feel was the burn of Jacob's gaze on his back, the memory of that iron grip on his wrist, and the awful certainty that his life had just been split clean in two parts. There was before Jacob Stone, and now there was after. They rode quiet as the canyon opened up into scrubland dotted with sagebrush and scattered pines. Jacob sat that horse like he was born in the saddle, moving with an easy grace that just seemed plumb impossible for a man his size. Daniel followed a few paces back, aware of every single shift of Jacob's shoulders, every tilt of his head, every moment them cold eyes glanced back to check up on him. The afternoon heat pressed down like a heavy blanket, and sweat trickled on down Daniel's spine. His mouth had gone bone dry again, but this time it had nothing to do with a lack of water. Every time Jacob looked at him, something coiled up tighter in Daniel's gut, something hot and insistent that made him shift around uneasy in the saddle. This was all wrong. This whole dang situation was wrong. He ought to take his gun back, shoot Jacob if he had to, and get back to tracking his brother's real killer by himself. But the very thought of riding off, of losing sight of that massive silhouette against the sky, sent a spike of something a lot like panic right through his chest. Jacob reined his horse in near a mess of rocks that gave a little shade. He swung down in one smooth motion and started unsaddling his horse without so much as a word. Daniel slid off his own mount, his legs wobbly after all them hours in the saddle, and made himself busy with his gear to keep from looking straight at Jacob. "We'll make camp here for the night." Jacob's voice cut clean through the silence. "Kane is holed up 2 days north in a mining camp. We ride at dawn." Daniel just nodded, not trusting his own voice. He focused on spreading his bedroll, on checking his supplies, on anything at all except for the way Jacob's shirt stuck to his broad back, dark with sweat, or the way his massive arms moved as he worked. But when Jacob pulled his shirt off all the way, wringing it out before slinging it over a rock to dry, Daniel's resolve just crumbled. He couldn't help but stare at the broad canvas of tanned skin and hard muscle, at the scars crisscrossing Jacob's back like a roadmap of a hard life, at the pure, raw power of the man. Jacob caught him staring. Course he did. Those icy blue eyes of his locked right onto Daniel's, and a slow, dangerous grin spread across his lips. "See something you like, boy?" Fire shot up Daniel's neck. He snapped his eyes at him, his heart pounding like a drum. "No, I was just looking at the scars." Jacob took a step closer, and Daniel had to fight every urge to back away. "Got most of these in the war, a few after. A man gets used to 'em." He was so close now that Daniel could feel the heat coming right off his bare skin. "You ever been in a real fight, Daniel Crow?" The sound of his full name sent a shiver straight down Daniel's spine. "I can hold my own." Jacob let out a low, rough chuckle. "I bet you can." He reached out a hand and Daniel flinched before he could stop it. Jacob's hand froze in midair, hovering near Daniel's shoulder, and something in his face changed. "Easy now, I'm just checking something." His fingers touched Daniel's shirt, finding a tear in the cloth Daniel hadn't even noticed. "You're bleeding." Daniel looked down. Sure as anything, blood had soaked through his shirt from a gash he must have gotten climbing over those rocks earlier. "It ain't nothing. Let me have a look." "I said it's nothing." Jacob's eyes went hard as stone. "And I said, let me see. You can do it yourself, or I can make you. It's your choice." Those words should have made Daniel mad as a hornet. Instead, they sent that strange fire burning through him all over again, making every muscle pull tight. He swallowed hard and pulled his shirt up over his head, laying his own torso bare to the scorching sun and to Jacob's heavy gaze. For what felt like a lifetime, Jacob just stared at him. Daniel had always been wiry, built for running and lasting, not for brute strength, and standing there in front of Jacob's massive frame made him feel like he could snap clean in two. The big man's eyes roamed over him slow, taking in every last scar, every line of muscle with a focus that made Daniel's skin feel like it was on fire. "Turn around." Daniel turned before his mind even caught up with his body. He felt Jacob move in behind him, felt the man's heat like standing too near a campfire, and then those massive hands landed on his back, and Daniel sucked in a sharp breath. "Hold still now." Jacob's voice was gravelly. His fingers explored the cut real gentle-like. In spite of the stinging, all Daniel could think about was the feel of those calloused hands on his bare skin, the strange closeness of it all, the way his whole body just lit up, aware of everything. This needs to be cleaned out. Jacob stepped away, and Daniel nearly cried out at the loss of his touch. He came back with a canteen and a mostly clean rag. This here's gonna sting. The water hit the wound and Daniel hissed, his muscles pulling tight. Jacob's hand came down on his shoulder blade, holding him steady, and that simple touch burned hotter than any whiskey poured in a wound. You did a good job tracking me. Jacob's voice was low, almost soft. Most fellas give up after a week, but you just kept on coming. Why is that? Daniel could barely draw a breath. He was my brother, the only family I had left in this world. Jacob's fingers traced the edge of the cut, checking his work, and a shudder ran right through Daniel. So what happens now? We find Cain. I'll kill him. Simple as that. Jacob was quiet for a good long moment, still touching Daniel's back, his hand feeling warm and steady. You ever had to kill a man before, boy? The question just hung there in the still air. Daniel wanted to lie, to sound tougher than he was, but something about Jacob's presence just pulled the honesty right out of him. No, sir. Figured not. Jacob's thumb moved in a slow circle against Daniel's shoulder blade, and it took everything Daniel had not to just lean into that touch. Killing a man changes you. Takes something you don't get back. You sure that's what you want? I want justice. Justice? Jacob repeated the word like it tasted foul. His hand slid away and Daniel felt the loss of it right away. Get yourself some rest. We're riding hard tomorrow. But sleep was a long way off. Daniel laid on his bedroll, just staring up at the stars, feeling every bit of Jacob's presence a few feet away. Every shift of the bigger man's body, every single breath seemed to get louder in the darkness. Daniel's mind was just racing with pictures he couldn't control, feelings he'd never known, and desires he surely didn't understand. He'd just been alone too long. That's all this was. Plain old loneliness getting mixed up with adrenaline and being bone-tired. Nothing more. It just couldn't be more. But when he finally fell into a rough sleep, his dreams were plumb full of ice-blue eyes, a grip like iron, and a voice promising to break him in ways he couldn't even begin to wrap his head around. The dawn came up cold and unforgiving. Daniel woke to find Jacob already up, saddling the horses with smooth, easy movements. His shirt was back on, but the memory of all that bare skin made Daniel's mouth go dry as a bone. They rode hard, just like Jacob said they would. The land around them changed from scrubland to rocky hills, and then to the first of the pine forests. Jacob barely said a word, but Daniel could feel his attention on him like a physical touch. Always there, always weighing him. By midday, they made it to a narrow creek, and Jacob finally called for a stop. Both men drank like they were dying of thirst, letting the horses rest and graze. Daniel splashed water on his face, trying to clear his mind, trying to focus on anything at all except the way Jacob moved, the way he took up space, the way Daniel's own body seemed to answer to him being near. You're thinking too loud. Jacob's voice startled him right good. The giant had moved up on him without making a single sound. I can practically hear your mind whirring from here. Daniel straightened up, water dripping down from his chin. I'm fine, you're a poor liar. Jacob stepped closer, and all of a sudden they were back in that heavy space from the canyon. Close enough that Daniel could see the little flecks of gray in Jacob's stubble. Close enough to smell the leather and sweat and something that was just purely him. You've been wound tighter than a banjo string since yesterday. What's going on inside that head of yours? Everything, nothing. Thoughts Daniel couldn't speak, feelings he had no name for, and desires that flat out terrified him. Nothing. I'm just focused on finding Cain. Jacob's eyes narrowed, reading him like an open book. Is that all it is? He leaned in just a hair, and Daniel's breath caught in his chest. Or is there something else bothering you? The question was loaded, heavy with things unsaid. Daniel's heart started to hammer. He ought to step back, ought to put some air between them, ought to break whatever this strange pull was. Instead, he just stood there frozen, trapped by Jacob's gaze. I don't know what you mean, don't you now? Jacob's hand came up, and one thick finger traced right along Daniel's jaw. Feather-light, even with the calluses. That touch sent a jolt clean through every last nerve. You've been staring a hole through me since yesterday, following me with those dark eyes like you're trying to figure something out. So I'm going to ask you again, what in the world is going on in that head of yours? Daniel's throat felt tight. The words just up and left him. He was drowning in the feeling, in how close they were, in the heavy presence of this man who had rolled into his life like a flash flood and turned everything completely upside down. I, his voice came out as just a whisper. I don't. You don't what? Jacob's thumb brushed right across Daniel's bottom lip, and Daniel near jumped out of his skin. Don't understand? Don't know what you're feeling? His voice dropped down even lower, real close and dangerous, or don't want to admit it. The truth hit Daniel like a ton of bricks. This wasn't confusion. This was not being tired or lonely or any of the other tall tales he'd been telling himself. This was desire, pure and simple, and it was terrifying. Desire for a man, for this man, for someone who could break him without even trying. Jacob. The name just fell from his lips, part prayer, part plea. Something flickered deep in Jacob's eyes, something hot and fierce. His hand moved to cup the back of Daniel's neck, and the grip was all possession, a command. Say it. Whatever it is you're thinking, whatever it is you're feeling, say it out loud. But Daniel just couldn't. The words were stuck in his throat, all tangled up with fear and want and shame. He had never felt this way about a single soul, had never even dreamed of feeling this way about a man. His whole view of the world was crashing down all around him, and he didn't know how to make heads or tails of it. Jacob saw the struggle in him. The hardness in his face softened just a hair, though his grip on Daniel's neck didn't give an inch. Now listen to me, boy. I've been around long enough to recognize the things most men try to bury. And what I see when I look at you, his thumb stroked the base of Daniel's skull, sending a wave of shivers clear down his spine. Is someone standing on the edge of a cliff, too scared to jump but too damn curious to walk away? The man had him pegged, all right. Daniel felt stripping bare, more exposed than if he'd taken off his shirt. Don't you lie to me. Jacob's voice went hard. And don't you lie to yourself. That just makes everything a whole lot worse. What do you want from me? The question burst out of him, all raw and desperate. Jacob's smile was slow and hungry. Want? That's the wrong question to be asking. The better question is, what do you want from me? His hand tightened on Daniel's neck. Not painful, but there was no question who was in control. Because the way you've been looking at me, the way you trembled when I touched you, that tells me you want something. You just don't have the guts to ask for it yet. Daniel's entire body felt like it was burning up from the inside. His skin felt too tight. His heart was beating a mile a minute. It was all just too intense. This is wrong. Says who? Jacob pulled him closer till they were chest to chest, and Daniel could feel that solid wall of muscle, could feel Jacob's heart beating steady and strong. Says some preacher who's never spent a long night all alone out in the desert. Says the city boy who couldn't make it a week out here. His grip on Daniel's neck shifted, his fingers tangling in Daniel's hair, and that closeness nearly made Daniel's knees buckle. Out here, there ain't no right or wrong. There just is. Only what is. And what is, Daniel Crow, is that you want this. You want me. And that spooks you more than any bullet ever could. Ever could. It was the gospel truth, all of it. The fear, the want, that terrible burning need that had planted itself deep in his chest and just refused to let go. Daniel's hands rose up like they had a mind of their own, pressing against Jacob's chest, and he couldn't tell if he was trying to shove him away or hold on for dear life. I ain't never. The words just faded. How could he explain it? How could he make Jacob understand this was all new country to him, scary and mighty thrilling all at once? But somehow Jacob seemed to get it anyway. His look changed, some of that hunter's edge softening into something that felt almost gentle. I know, a man can see it. His hand moved from Daniel's neck to his jaw, tilting his face up. But that don't change what's churning inside you. It just means you ain't figured out what to do with it yet. Teach me. The words tumbled out before Daniel could bite him back, and his face lit up with shame and a desperate kind of need. A storm gathered in Jacob's eyes. For a long, quiet moment, he just stared at Daniel, and the heat of that stare made Daniel want to jump right out of his own skin. Then Jacob's thumb traced over Daniel's lips again, pressing down easy, and Daniel's mouth fell open all on its own. "Them's dangerous words, son." Jacob's voice was like gravel and honey. "You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me." Well, that just about broke whatever hold Jacob had. He made a low sound, almost a growl, and then all of a sudden his mouth was on Daniel's, taking him with a force that scattered every last thought from his mind. The kiss wasn't anything like Daniel ever figured a kiss could be. It was rough and demanding. Jacob's lips were bruising against his tongue sweeping past all of Daniel's defenses to taste him and claim him. Daniel gasped right into it, his hands balling up in Jacob's shirt, his whole world shrinking down to just that feeling. A fire flooded through him, gathering low in his gut, making him ache in ways he had never known. Jacob's arms wrapped around him, one hand planted firm on the small of his back, the other still tangled up in his hair, and Daniel felt completely swallowed up, completely owned. When Jacob finally drew back, they were both breathing heavy. Daniel just stared up at him, dazed and confused, his lips feeling all swollen and buzzing. Every last nerve in his body was wide awake, just humming with a powerful need. "You still think this ain't right?" Jacob's voice was raspy, his eyes blazing with fire. Daniel couldn't answer, couldn't even think straight. He could only feel how powerful right it was to be in Jacob's arms, to be kissed like he was something precious and something to be torn into all at the same time. Jacob gave a slow, satisfied smile. "That's what I figured." He let Daniel go all of a sudden, and Daniel stumbled, catching his balance on a nearby rock. "We gotta keep moving, but tonight," his eyes roamed over Daniel like he owned him and was starving for him. "Tonight, we're gonna finish this conversation." The promise in those words made Daniel's stomach knot up with a mix of excitement and pure old fear. He just gave a short nod, not trusting his own voice, and headed over to his horse on legs that felt like jelly. The rest of that day passed by in a blur. Daniel couldn't focus on a single thing except the memory of Jacob's mouth on his own, the feel of those strong arms around him, and the promise hanging heavy in the air between them. Every time Jacob looked back at him, Daniel felt it on his skin like a hot brand, and his body answered back with a downright shameful eagerness. By the time they made camp for the night, Daniel was wound up tighter than a $2 watch, thought he might just fall to pieces. Jacob got a fire going, quick and sure, then sat down across from Daniel, those ice-blue eyes of his never once looking away. "Come here." The order was quiet, but there was no arguing with it. Daniel found himself moving before he even thought to, crossing the small space to stand right in front of Jacob. The firelight threw shadows all over Jacob's face, making him look even wilder, more powerful. Jacob reached on out and took a hold of Daniel's hips, pulling him down to straddle his lap. It brought them eye to eye, though Jacob's pure size still made Daniel feel slight. His hands came to rest on Daniel's waist, his thumbs sweeping over the bare skin where his shirt had hitched up. "You've been thinking about this all day long." It was not a question. Jacob's hand slid right up under Daniel's shirt, his rough palms against sensitive skin, and Daniel couldn't help but shiver. "I can see it in how you carry yourself, the way you keep sneaking looks at me." His grip got a little tighter, possessive. "Tell me what you want." Daniel's breath hitched in his chest. His hands found their way to Jacob's shoulders, feeling that solid muscle underneath. I want you to." "To what?" Jacob's hands moved on up, tracing the shape of Daniel's ribs, making him arch back without meaning to. "To touch you, to kiss you again." His voice got low, like a deep rumble. "To show you just what it feels like to fall apart completely." A soft little sound slipped from Daniel's throat. He had never made a noise like that in his life, never felt so desperate and wanting. Yes, all of it, everything. Jacob's smile was pure devilment. "Good boy." His hands moved to Daniel's back, pulling him in close till their chests were pressed tight. "But we're gonna take our sweet time with this. I ain't not gonna rush it, not gonna break you just 'cause you're begging for it." He nipped at Daniel's jaw, making him suck in a breath. I'm going to take you apart piece by piece until you can't even recall what it felt like to not want this. Those words sent fire shooting through Daniel's veins. His hips rolled forward all on their own, looking for pressure, looking for some kind of relief. And Jacob let out a low groan from deep in his chest. Eager, Jacob's hands took a hold of Daniel's hips, holding him still. But you're going to learn some patience. You're going to learn to wait, to take what I give you, and not an inch more. His mouth moved right next to Daniel's ear. And when I finally decide you've earned it, when I decide you are ready, I'm fixing to make you feel things you never even knew were possible. Daniel was just drowning in the feeling, in the need, in the sheer presence of this man who'd somehow staked a claim on his body and soul in less than 2 whole days. His fingers dug into Jacob's shoulders, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned all soft and strange. Please. The word was hardly more than a breath. Jacob pulled back to look him in the eye, and whatever he saw in Daniel's face made his own expression soften just a bit. Not yet, but soon. His hand came up to hold Daniel's face, his thumb brushing across his cheekbone with a gentleness he didn't expect. First, you're going to learn what it means to trust someone all the way, to put yourself in another man's hands and know he ain't going to destroy you. And then, Jacob's smile turned downright wicked. Then I'm going to ruin you for anybody else. That promise settled on Daniel like a hot brand, marking him, for good and all. And as Jacob kissed him again, slow and deep like a Texas drawl, Daniel knew he couldn't give a damn about what was right and what was wrong anymore. He didn't care a lick about nothing except this. This man, this very moment, this awful, wonderful feeling of falling into something he couldn't steer and had no mind to run from. His brother's passing, his whole mission of getting even, the future waiting on him. All of it just turned to smoke next to the feel of Jacob's hands on his skin and knowing his life had just been split clean in two, a before and an after. And there sure as heck was no going back. The fire was burning low as Jacob's kisses wandered from Daniel's mouth to his jaw, to that tender spot right below his ear that made Daniel gasp and arch his back. Those big old hands traced over him real slow-like, learning every scar, every hollow, every place that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat and his body shake. Lord, you answer back so quick. Jacob's voice was gravelly with praise. Every touch gets a shudder, every kiss gets a sound. You got any idea how much a man can get hooked on that? Daniel couldn't answer, couldn't string 2 words together, while Jacob's mouth was doing wicked things to his neck, while those hands were slipping under his shirt again, pushing it up and off till Daniel was bare-chested in the firelight. Jacob eased back just enough to get a good look at him, and the pure hunger in his eyes made Daniel feel like a cornered rabbit and a found treasure all at the same time. Beautiful, Jacob rumbled low, and the word made Daniel's face heat up. Nobody had ever called him that before. Not a soul had ever looked at him the way Jacob was looking now, like he was fixing to swallow him whole. I ain't, Daniel started to say, but Jacob's fingers pressed against his lips, hushing him. Don't you argue with me. Not about this. His hand slid down Daniel's chest, palm flat over his hammering heart. I say you are beautiful, and that's the gospel truth. His eyes locked on Daniel's, hard and steady. And you're going to learn to believe it, 'cause I don't waste my breath on lies. The solid truth in his voice made something crack wide open in Daniel's chest. He'd been alone for so long, just another face in the dust, trying to get by, that the very idea of being seen, really and truly seen, scared him spitless and excited him all at once. Jacob's hands moved down to Daniel's belt, and Daniel's breath just up and quit. Now's the time you tell me to stop, if that's what you're wanting. Jacob's eyes searched his face. 'Cause once we cross this line, Daniel, his voice was low, there ain't no turning back. You'll be all mine, and I ain't one for sharing. That claim in his words should have spooked him. Instead, it sent a fire spreading low in Daniel's gut, making him ache with want. I don't want you to stop. Good. Jacob's smile was like a wolf's as he unbuckled Daniel's belt like he'd done it 1,000 times. 'Cause I wasn't planning on it. What came next was a slow, sweet torture, a lesson in giving in. Jacob took his sweet time, his hands and mouth learning every last inch of Daniel's body, finding all the spots that made him gasp and whimper and plead. He whispered all kinds of wicked promises against Daniel's skin, telling him in plain, raw detail just how he was going to take him, just what it'd feel like when Daniel finally broke apart for him. And through it all, Daniel just burned. His skin felt like it was on fire, every last nerve end singing with feeling. He never knew his own body could feel like this, never even dreamed that a touch could make him come so completely unraveled. Jacob's hands roamed everywhere, marking him, claiming him, teaching him just what it meant to belong to someone completely. Please, Daniel's voice cracked, sounding strange even to himself, broken and desperate. Please, I need... What do you need? Jacob's mouth moved against his collarbone, his teeth grazing it just so. Use your words, boy. Tell me exactly what it is you want. But Daniel just could not. The words scattered like dust the moment he tried to form them, lost in the powerful feeling of Jacob's hands, Jacob's mouth, Jacob's whole body pressed up against his. I cannot say it. Jacob's laugh was low and dark. Then I reckon you do not need it bad enough yet. His hands went still, and Daniel made a little sound of protest that made his own cheeks burn. Shh, have some patience. I told you I am not rushing this. We have all night long, and I am going to use every second of it to make sure you never forget who you belong to. The night stretched on, seeming endless and mighty. Jacob kept his promise, taking Daniel apart with a slow, careful touch, building up the pleasure until Daniel figured he would die from it, then easing off just enough to keep him right there on the edge. It was pure torment. It was pure bliss. It was everything Daniel never knew he was missing. And when Jacob finally, at long last, gave him permission to let go, when those strong hands and that deep voice pushed him over the brink, Daniel shattered so completely, he plumb forgot his own name. Wave after wave of feeling crashed over him, drowning him, making him new until he could not tell where he ended and Jacob began. He came back to himself real slow, wrapped up tight in Jacob's arms, his body still shaking with the aftershocks. Jacob's hand stroked through his hair, gentle as could be now, soothing. His voice rumbled right next to Daniel's ear, low and satisfied. Mine now, all mine. And Daniel, still floating in the calm after the storm, could only nod because he knew it was the gospel truth. Somewhere in the last 2 days, he had stopped being Daniel Crow, the lone tracker looking for payback, and had become Daniel Crow, the man who belonged to Jacob Stone. The change scared him something awful, but as Jacob pulled him in closer, as that powerful body surrounded him completely, Daniel realized he would not go back, not even if he could. This feeling, this powerful connection was worth any price, even if it cost him every single thing he used to be. Morning came way too soon. Daniel woke up all bundled in blankets, held tight in Jacob's arms. The fire had burned down to nothing but embers. His body ached in ways he had never known, marked by Jacob's claim on him. And though the proof of last night made his face burn, even as a warm and possessive feeling settled deep in his chest, Jacob was already wide awake, those ice-blue eyes watching him with pure satisfaction. How are you feeling? Aching, overwhelmed, changed? Good, Daniel managed to say, his voice all rough and gravelly. Jacob's smile was slow. Just good. His hand slid over Daniel's hip like he owned it. I must be losing my touch. The easy way he did that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. This was real. Last night had not been some wild dream or a moment of madness. He really had given himself over completely to this man. He really had let Jacob claim him in ways he still did not quite understand. We ought to get moving. Daniel's attempt to sound normal failed in a big way, his voice shaking. We have to find Cain. We will. Jacob pulled him in closer, and Daniel went without a fight, unable to resist that strong pull. But first, we are going to talk about what happens after we track down Cain, after you get your revenge. Jacob's eyes were dead serious now. What then, Daniel? You just go back to being all by your lonesome, wandering from town to town with nothing and no one? The question hit a whole lot harder than Daniel expected. He had not thought 1 second past finding his brother's killer. had not let himself imagine a future past this moment. But now, wrapped in Jacob's arms, just thinking about leaving made his chest tighten real bad. He swallowed hard, realizing he hadn't thought that far ahead. Well, it was time to start. Jacob's hand moved to Daniel's jaw, turning his face so their eyes locked. Because I meant what I said last night. You're mine now, and I look after what's mine. His thumb brushed Daniel's lips softly. Here's what's going to happen. We find Cain. You get your justice. Then you come with me. Come with you where? I got a spot up in Montana. Cabin and some land. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Quiet. Far from folks who ask too many questions. His eyes searched Daniel's face. You could build a life there with me, if that's what you want. The offer hung heavy between them. Big, scary, and too tempting to ignore. A home. Someone to come back to. An end to the loneliness that had chewed at him for so long. But it also meant admitting what he'd become, accepting this bond that went against everything he thought he knew about himself. What if I ain't ready? The question came out quiet, small, and afraid. Jacob's face softened. Then we take it slow, but I ain't letting you go, Daniel. Not now that I've found you. His hand moved to the back of Daniel's neck, firm and possessive. You're mine, and I protect what's mine, even from your own doubts. Something inside Daniel cracked wide open. He'd been alone so long, telling himself he didn't need nobody. That needin' made you weak. But Jacob's surety, his unshakable belief, made Daniel want to believe there could be something different. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Jacob's smile was bright and rare. He kissed Daniel deeply, a claim that left no doubt about where he stood, then pulled back. Good, now get dressed. We got a killer to find. They rode hard that day, and Daniel noticed the change in Jacob's mood. The gentle man from the morning was gone, replaced by the fierce predator Daniel met in Redgate Canyon. But now Daniel saw beneath that tough exterior, catching the little ways Jacob's eyes never left him. The protective drive behind every move. By late afternoon, they made it to the mining camp Jacob talked about. It was a rough patch of tents and makeshift buildings filled with desperate men and risky deals. The kind of place where fights broke out often and questions weren't welcome. Jacob dismounted, pulling Daniel aside, voice low but urgent. Cain's here. I can feel it, but you gotta listen close. His hands gripped Daniel's shoulders tight. When we find him, you let me handle it. Don't charge in alone. No unnecessary risks. Got it? Daniel wanted to argue, to say this was his fight, but Jacob's eyes stopped him cold. This wasn't just about keeping Daniel safe. It was something deeper, something not about revenge, but about the bond growing strong between them. Understood, Daniel said. They moved through the camp side by side, Jacob's presence parting the crowd like a boat in water. It wasn't about payback. It was all about the strong bond they'd built together. Daniel nodded, catching on quick. Side by side, they walked through the camp, Jacob cutting through the crowd like a trusty steamboat through the water. Through water. Folks just took one look at him and got out of the way, knowing a predator when they saw one. Daniel stayed right on his heels, feeling every muscle of Jacob's body next to his, and the way those eyes of his never stopped scanning for threats. They found Cain in a tent round the back of camp, counting money from his latest swindle. He was the spitting image of what Jacob described, tall and wiry with a nasty scar right across his throat. The second he laid eyes on him, his hand went for his gun. Jacob was still as a stone. Cain's voice was a rough rasp, all torn up by whatever left that scar. Heard you were dead. Heard the same about you. Jacob's voice was cold as a January wind. But here we are. Cain's eyes cut over to Daniel, and a little flicker of knowing passed through him. This the crow boy? Heard he was asking questions. His smile was just plain cruel. Reckon he found what he was looking for. A hot, blind rage washed over Daniel. This was the man who took Thomas, the one who had wrecked the only family Daniel had left in this world. His hand started for his gun, but Jacob shot out like a snake, clamping his wrist in that iron grip. Not yet, Jacob muttered low. Then louder to Cain, you killed his brother and you framed an innocent man. How many others you done wrong? Cain just shrugged his shoulders. Lost count. What's it matter anyhow? They were all weak, got what was coming to 'em. Hearing him say it so easy like made Daniel see red. He lunged forward, but Jacob held him back without even breaking a sweat. His strength was that sure. Patience now, Jacob said, real quiet. Then his gun was in his hand, faster than a blink, and the shot roared through that little tent. Kane crumpled, a perfect hole right in his chest, the shock still frozen on his face. He was gone before he ever hit the dirt. The quiet that came after was louder than the gunshot. Daniel just stared at the body, waiting to feel satisfied, waiting for that feeling of justice. But all he felt was a big, hollow emptiness. Thomas was still gone. Getting even hadn't brought him back. Nothing would. Jacob holstered his pistol and turned to Daniel, reading his face like an open book. This is what I was talking about. Killing a man don't fix nothing. It just adds another stone to the load you're carrying. Daniel's throat felt tight. Then why'd you do it? Because he had it coming. And because I wasn't about to let you carry that particular burden. Jacob's hand cupped Daniel's face, his thumb gently brushing away tears. Daniel didn't even know he was crying. You've carried enough already, Daniel Crow. It's time you let someone else help with the load. Those words just broke something inside Daniel. He stumbled forward and Jacob caught him, solid as an old oak tree. Daniel cried right into that broad chest, finally mourning his brother the right way for the first time since he heard the news, letting go of all the grief and anger and fear he'd been holding on to so tight. And Jacob just held him right on through it, one hand stroking his hair, murmuring quiet words that somehow made the hurt a little easier to bear. When Daniel finally pulled away, his eyes all swollen and his chest aching, Jacob wiped his face with a gentleness that was a pure surprise. You ready to go home? Home. That word settled over Daniel like a warm blanket. Not his brother's grave, not that empty ranch. Home with Jacob up in Montana, building something new from the ashes of everything he'd lost. Yes, Daniel whispered. I'm ready. They rode on out of that mining camp just as the sun was setting, painting the whole sky in shades of orange and fiery red. Daniel kept his horse right up close to Jacob's, their legs nearly touching. And for the first time in months, he felt something that felt an awful lot like peace. The road ahead was going to be a long one. There'd be hard days, tough adjustments, times when doubt would surely creep in. But whenever Daniel looked over at Jacob, at the man who had claimed him so completely, he just knew it was all going to be worth it. Because sometimes a man's salvation shows up in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes it shows up looking like a giant cowboy, with eyes as blue as a winter sky and hands made of pure iron. Someone who looked right past his walls, saw the lonesome soul hiding inside, and decided he was a keeper. And Daniel Crow, who'd been on his own for so long, was finally ready to let someone hold on to him. The long ride to Montana took a hard 3 weeks, pushing through country that changed from dry scrubland to rolling grasslands, and then up to the foothills of mountains, so tall they just about scratched the heavens. Daniel watched it all change, feeling like he was shucking off his old skin with every mile that passed. The fellow who rode out looking for payback seemed like a ghost from another life, replaced by a new man, one who'd look over at Jacob riding next to him and feel a warmth in his chest that scared him and thrilled him all at the same time. Jacob was a different man out on the trail. Still in charge, still stronger than any man had a right to be, but there was an ease about him now, something that wasn't there before. He'd catch Daniel looking at him more than once and would just smile, real slow and knowing, in a way that made Daniel's face flush hot and his heart start to pound. Come nightfall, when they'd set up camp, Jacob would pull Daniel in tight. Those big old arms of his felt like a fortress, and Daniel would drift off to sleep, feeling safer than he'd ever felt in his whole life. But the nearer they got to Montana, the more his old doubts started crawling back in. What in the world did he know about building a life with another man? About being wanted, about being kept? He'd been a lone wolf for so long that the very idea of something lasting felt like trying to cup water in his hands. About 3 days out from Jacob's place, they pulled into a little trading post to get more supplies. Daniel was looking over a new saddle blanket when a sharp voice cut through the low hum of the store. Well, I'll be, if it ain't Jacob Stone. Daniel turned around and saw a fella about Jacob's age, all weathered and scarred, carrying the look of a man who'd seen hard times and lived to tell about it. Jacob's face stayed like a stone, but Daniel saw his shoulders tighten up just a bit. Marcus, Jacob's voice was flat, giving nothing away. Marcus's gaze slid over to Daniel, sharp as a tack and sizing him up. Got yourself a new riding partner, I see. A bit younger than your usual taste. The meaning hung there in the dusty air, and Daniel felt a hot blush creep up his neck. Jacob took a step forward, and even though Marcus was a big fella himself, he seemed to get smaller with Jacob standing over him. You best be careful, Marcus. I'd surely hate for this to get ugly. Marcus put his hands up like he was surrendering. Hey now, no harm meant. I'm just a little surprised to see the great Jacob Stone finally pick one to stick with. His smile got a mean, calculating edge to it. Or is this just another one of your little arrangements? You never were one for keeping things around for good. That word, temporary, hit Daniel like a fist to the gut. Was that all he was? Just the next man in a long line that Jacob had taken up with and then thrown away? That little whisper of doubt in the back of his mind suddenly turned into a roar. Jacob's hand shot out like a snake, grabbing Marcus by his collar and slamming him back against the wall so hard the whole shelf rattled. You don't know what you're talking about. And if you want to keep your teeth in your head, you won't say another word about him. Marcus held up his hands again, his eyes getting wide. All right, I hear you loud and clear. Jacob let him go and turned to Daniel, whose face must have been showing everything he was feeling. 'Cause Jacob's eyes went dark with a look that was something awful close to pain. Out there now, they were standing behind the trading post, the wind stirring up dust devils between them. Jacob's jaw was set hard, his hands balled up into fists at his sides. Whatever you're thinking, you stop it now. Daniel swallowed hard. How many? How many others came before me? Jacob was quiet for a good long while. Does it really matter? Yes. Daniel's voice just about broke. Because I've got to know if this is the real deal or if I'm just another man you keep around till you've had your fun. Jacob closed the space between them in two long steps, his hands cupping Daniel's face with a surprising gentleness. Now you listen to me. There have been others. I won't lie to you about that. Men I was with because I was lonely, because I just needed somebody for a night, or maybe a week. But not a single one of them was like you. His thumbs gently brushed across Daniel's cheekbones. None of them ever made me want more than just a passing thing. Not one of them made me think about building something that would last. How am I supposed to know that's true? How do I know you won't just wake up one morning and decide that I'm not enough for you? Jacob's eyes were blazing. Because I have never brought a single soul to my home before. Because I've never let anyone get this close. Because when I look at you, Daniel Crow, I don't see someone who's just passing through. I see forever. That word just hung there between them, big and scary, and more beautiful than anything. Daniel's vision started to blur with tears he fought like hell to keep back. I'm scared. I know. Jacob pulled him in close, and Daniel just buried his face in that broad chest, breathing in the smell of leather and sweat and something that was pure Jacob. But being scared don't mean you go running off. It means you hold on even tighter. His hand gently stroked through Daniel's hair. I am not letting you go. Not today. Not ever. You're mine and I'm yours, and that's all there is to it. Daniel's hands bunched up in Jacob's shirt. Promise me. Promise me this is real. I swear it on everything I own. Jacob tilted Daniel's face up to his. His look was fierce and tender all at the same time. You are not just passing through. You are home, and I protect what's mine. The kiss that came next was desperate and claiming, with Jacob pouring every bit of his heart into it till Daniel just couldn't doubt it anymore. Couldn't think past the solid gold certainty that this man meant every last word. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against Daniel's. 3 more days, and then you'll see. Then you'll know, for sure. They reached Jacob's land on a clear afternoon, with the sun painting everything in gold. The cabin sat down in a valley circled by piney woods, with a creek running close by and mountains standing tall in the distance. It was tucked away, beautiful, And somehow it was exactly what Daniel had pictured without even knowing he'd been picturing it. Jacob swung down from his horse and just stood there, watching Daniel's face. What do you think? Daniel slid off his horse, taking it all in. The cabin was sturdy and well built, with smoke already curling up from the chimney. The barn looked new, and the fences were strong. This was not just a place to get by. This was a place to truly live. It's perfect, Daniel whispered. Jacob's smile was as bright as the sun. He took a hold of Daniel's hand, weaving their fingers together, and pulled him on toward the cabin. Come on now, I want to show you everything. The inside was simple but real comfortable. A big stone fireplace took up one whole wall, with a large bed in the corner all covered in furs. A table, some chairs, and shelves lined with books. It felt lived in and cared for. Jacob cleared his throat. It felt like home. He watched Daniel explore, a soft look on his face. The bedroom is right on through there. There is storage up in the loft. The creek is about 100 yards out for water. We have got chickens, a few head of cattle, enough to keep us fed, and then some. Daniel turned to face him. Us, Jacob confirmed, his voice low. He walked right over to Daniel, backing him gently against the wall with purpose. This is our home now, our land, our life. His hand settled on Daniel's hips. And that bed in there, that is our bed, where I am going to remind you every single night that you belong to me. A deep warmth flooded through Daniel. Every night, Jacob's mouth found his neck. Every morning, every moment, I can get you all to myself. His teeth grazed that sensitive skin. I told you I would ruin you for anyone else. That promise stands. Daniel's hands clutched at Jacob's shoulders. Good, because I do not want anyone else. Just you, Jacob groaned, the sound a low rumble through both of them. Dangerous words. He pulled back just enough to look Daniel square in the eye. But before I take you to that bed and remind you exactly who you belong to, there is something I need to do. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 silver rings, plain and simple. Daniel's breath hitched. I had these made in town. Men like us cannot marry. The law does not see it. The church does not bless it. But I do not care about their laws or their blessings. Jacob took Daniel's left hand, his own trembling just a bit. What I care about is making a vow to you, that I will protect you, provide for you, and stand right beside you no matter what comes. That this here is not temporary, not something that ends when the newness wears off. This is forever. Daniel's throat closed up tight. Tears spilled over even though he tried his best to hold them back. Daniel, Jacob asked, will you take this ring? Will you make this vow with me? Will you build this life knowing it will be hard sometimes? Knowing people will judge us? Knowing we will have to be mighty careful? Jacob's eyes searched his face. Will you be mine? Officially and completely, for as long as we both live. Daniel could not speak past the feeling choking him up. He could only nod frantically, his own hand reaching for the second ring. When he finally found his voice, it came out broken but fierce. Yes. Yes to every bit of it. Forever. Jacob slid the ring onto Daniel's finger, and Daniel did the same, his hands shaking so badly that Jacob had to steady them. The metal was warm and solid, a physical reminder of this impossible, beautiful thing between them. Mine, Jacob whispered against his lips. Yours, Daniel confirmed, and you are mine too. Always have been, from the moment you tracked me down in that canyon with fire in your eyes and vengeance in your heart. Jacob kissed him, slow and deep. You laid a claim on me without even knowing it. What came next was a slow, thorough claiming of their very own. Jacob carried Daniel to their bed, laying him down with reverence and hunger all tangled up together. He took his sweet time, learning Daniel's body like it was new territory to explore, finding every spot that made Daniel gasp and arch and beg. And when Jacob finally joined them as one, when they moved together in perfect time, Daniel understood what forever really meant. It was this connection that went deeper than just wanting. This bond that went beyond everything he thought he knew about himself. It was choosing to stay put, even when fear was whispering for him to run. It was trusting someone with all his broken pieces and letting them help make something whole again. Afterwards, all wrapped up in Jacob's arms with their rings glinting in the firelight, Daniel felt a real peace settle over him like a warm blanket. His brother's memory was honored. His lonely wandering was finally over. And in its place was something better than he ever imagined. "Tell me this is real," he whispered against Jacob's chest. "Tell me I ain't gonna wake up alone come morning." Jacob's arms tightened right around him. "It's as real as it gets, more real than anything I've ever had. And tomorrow when you wake up, I'll be right here. Just like the day after that, and the day after that, until we're old and gray and still bickering about who's got to feed the chickens." Daniel laughed, and the sound was a little watery but true. "I love you." The words just slipped out before he could stop them, all raw and with no guard up. Jacob went real still. Then he rolled them over so he could see Daniel's face proper. His look was intense. "Say it again." "I love you," Daniel repeated, stronger this time. "I know it's fast. I know we barely even know each other, but I do. I love you." Jacob's smile was something fierce. "Fast, Daniel. I do believe I fell for you the moment you stood in that canyon, shaking like a leaf but refusing to back down one bit. I knew then you were different, knew I wanted to keep you." His hand cupped Daniel's face. "And I love you too, more than I ever thought I could love anything." The kiss that followed was tender, just full of promise and certainty. When they finally settled in again, their arms and legs all tangled up, Daniel felt the very last of his fear just melt away. The days that came after fell into a comfortable rhythm. They'd wake before the dawn to tend to the animals, work the land side by side, and share meals at the rough-hewn table. Jacob taught Daniel things he never knew, like how to read the weather in the mountains, how to track game in the pine forests, how to get by when winter came on hard and fast. But it was the nights Daniel cherished the most. After all the work was done, in that cabin all warm with a fire, Jacob would pull him close, and they would talk for hours. Jacob told him about the war, about the good men he lost, about the years he spent just drifting before he found this place. Daniel shared his own stories, the loneliness of watching his folks pass on, the deep love he had for Thomas, the emptiness that had nearly consumed him after. And slowly those old wounds began to heal. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but changed into something bearable because he was sharing it. One evening, about 2 months after they got there, Daniel stood on the porch watching the sun set down behind the mountains. He heard Jacob's footsteps behind him, felt those strong arms wrap around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob's voice rumbled low against his ear. "That I'm happy." Daniel leaned back into him. "I never thought I'd say that again after Thomas died, but here I am with you, and I'm happy." Jacob's arms held him tighter. "Good, 'cause I plan on keeping you happy for a very long time." They stood there as the darkness fell, wrapped in each other, and Daniel felt the truth of it settle deep down in his bones. This was where he belonged. Not wandering empty trails seeking revenge, not drowning in loneliness and whiskey, but right here, in this valley with this man who had taken a broken soul and helped it find its way home. The years passed, the cabin grew into a proper homestead. They put up a second barn, grew the herd, and planted an orchard that would take a good long while to mature. But Lord, it promised a bounty. Neighbors were few and far between, but the ones they ran into accepted them without much fuss. Two fellas living together wasn't unheard of in these parts, and long as they minded their own business and didn't stir up trouble, most folks didn't pay it no mind. The haunted look left Daniel's face, replaced by laugh lines and a peacefulness weathered by the sun. Jacob's hard edges softened, and his smiles came a whole lot easier. His rare laugh was a gift Daniel treasured every single time. Now they'd lock horns sometimes. Two strong-willed men sharing one roof, it was bound to happen. But they always worked their way through it, always chose to stay and fight for what they had instead of just walking away. And every night they'd fall asleep, wrapped up in each other's arms, the silver rings on their fingers catching the firelight, a promise kept and made new with every dawn. A full 10 years after that first meeting in Red Gate Canyon, Daniel stood on the porch of their home, which was now bigger and better than you could have ever imagined. Jacob came up behind him, a little older now, but still strong as an ox, still larger than life, and still completely Daniel's. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob's arms circled his waist, familiar and just right. Daniel leaned back into him, smiling. That I used to reckon revenge would fix me, that finding my brother's killer would fill that empty space inside. He turned in Jacob's arms, looking up into those ice blue eyes that still made his heart pound. But what really mended me was this. You, us, building something beautiful out of all the broken pieces. Jacob kissed him, slow and deep and full of the certainty that comes from a decade of choosing each other every single day. I love you, Daniel Crow. I love you, Jacob Stone. Daniel rested his head against that broad chest, listening to the steady heartbeat right underneath. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me. Jacob held him tighter. Thank you for tracking me down, for being too stubborn to quit, for choosing to stay even when it got scary. His voice dropped to a whisper. Thank you for being my home. They stood right there as the sun went down behind the mountains they had claimed as their own. Two men who found each other in the harsh wilderness of the West and built a love that beat all the odds. The world might never understand. The law might never recognize them. But here in this valley, they carved out of nothing. They were everything to each other. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Daniel Crow had set out looking for vengeance and found redemption, had tracked a killer and found salvation, had braced himself for death and discovered life. And every day for the rest of his days, he thanked whatever strange twist of fate had led him to that canyon, to that moment, to the man who became his whole world. Because sometimes the best stories aren't about revenge or justice or even winning. Sometimes the best stories are about two broken souls finding each other in the wasteland and choosing against all odds to heal up together. This was their story, written in silver rings and shared breaths in a decade of mornings waking up side by side. Written in the land they worked, in the home they built, in the love they chose every single day. And it was a story worth living. Winter came on hard that year, the 12th winter they had spent together in the valley. Snow piled up high against the cabin walls, and the wind howled right through the pines like something wild and from another time. But inside, the fire crackled warm, and Daniel sat at the table working on the ledgers, while Jacob was carving a new axe handle out of some seasoned hickory. These quiet evenings were Daniel's favorite, for sure. No words were needed, just the easy company of the man he loved, the man who had become as needful as taking a breath. He glanced up, watching Jacob's hands, how they moved so sure and steady, those same hands that could calm down a spooked horse or hold Daniel with a tenderness that could just about break a man. Jacob looked up, caught him looking, and smiled. What's on your mind? Nothing, just thinking on how lucky I am. Jacob set down his knife and crossed to Daniel, pulling him right up out of that chair and into his arms. Lucky, huh? Luck didn't have a thing to do with it. You tracked me down like a hound dog on a fresh trail. If anybody's lucky around here, it's me. His mouth found Daniel's, kissing him with the easy way they'd known for years, but with a fire that never did burn out. Daniel just melted into him, his hands sliding under Jacob's shirt to feel the warmth of his skin. Even after all this time, just touching Jacob sent a jolt clear through him. Take me to bed, he breathed right against Jacob's lips. Feeling a little bossy tonight, are we? But Jacob's eyes went dark with that familiar want, and he scooped Daniel right up, carrying him toward their bedroom, despite Daniel laughing and protesting that he was getting too old for all this. You'll never be too old for me to carry, Jacob growled, kicking the door shut behind him. Never too old for me to put my claim on. Never too old for me to remind you exactly who you belong to. Those words sent a fire straight to Daniel's gut. After a whole 12 years, Jacob still knew just what to say to make him come apart. And as Jacob laid him down on the bed, covering Daniel's body with his own solid weight, Daniel just gave in to that sweet, familiar feeling of being completely loved. Later on, all wrapped up in blankets together, Daniel traced the little bits of new gray in Jacob's beard. We're getting old, you know. Speak for yourself, I'm still in my prime. But Jacob's smile was soft. His hand was real gentle as it stroked through Daniel's hair. Though I'll give you this, my knees do complain a bit more in the mornings. Mine too. Daniel nestled closer, breathing in the man's scent. Do you ever regret it, hitching your wagon to mine, when you could have just been free? Jacob's arms held him a little tighter. Every time you ask me that, which you do about once a year, the answer's always the same. No, never, not for one single second. He tilted Daniel's face up. The look on his face was fierce. You're the best dang thing that ever happened to me, Daniel Crow. And I would choose you again every single time. The sureness in his voice made Daniel's heart ache with so much love. Even when I go and burn supper. Even then, Jacob kissed his forehead. Even when you leave the barn door wide open and the chickens get out. Even when you argue with me about the stupidest things. And yes, even when you snore. I do not snore. Oh, you absolutely done. Jacob's laugh rumbled deep in his chest, shaking both of them. But I love you anyway. I love all of you. Every stubborn, beautiful, infuriating piece. Daniel hit his face in Jacob's chest, just overcome with feeling, even after all these years. I love you too, more than I've got the words for. They drifted to sleep just like that, all tangled up together, and when morning came, they woke to find the storm had passed, leaving the whole world covered in a clean white blanket. Spring showed up with a rush of melting snow and the sound of the birds coming back home. Daniel was out in the garden getting the soil ready for planting when he heard the sound of horses coming up the trail. He stood up straight. His hand just naturally went to that rifle propped up on the fence post, but he eased up some when he saw it was Marshal Tucker. He'd know that shape anywhere. The marshal was getting on in years, his hair gone snow white, but he still sat a horse like he owned it. He swung down slow, putting more weight on his bad leg than usual. Is Jacob Brown? Tucker asked, taking the cup of water Daniel handed him. He's in the barn. I'll go fetch him. Daniel hollered, and a minute later Jacob came out, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. Well, Marshal, didn't figure on seeing you till summertime. Tucker's face was dead serious. Got some news I reckon y'all ought to hear straight from me. I thought you should hear in person. There's a new territorial governor coming to town. Some young fella from back east, just full of highfalutin ideas about cleaning up this territory. He took a long pause. He's been asking a lot of questions. About bachelors living out on their own together. About arrangements he don't see as natural. A chill went right through Daniel. Jacob's face set like granite. What kind of questions? Jacob's voice was low and tight. The kind of questions that make a man like me uneasy. He's bringing in his own deputies. Men who don't have my sense of minding their own business. Tucker looked Jacob square in the eye. I came out here to warn y'all. Things could get mighty uncomfortable. Y'all might need to be a little more careful for a spell. Jacob reached for Daniel's hand and squeezed it hard. We ain't done nothing wrong. This is our land, bought and paid for, legal-like. We haven't broken a single law. I know that, and you know that. But this new governor fella, he sees things in black and white. He thinks folks like y'all are some kind of blight that needs to be wiped clean. Tucker's voice got real quiet. I'll do what I can to point him in another direction. But y'all have got to be smart. Lay low. Don't you give him one single reason to cast his eye on this place. After Tucker rode off, Daniel and Jacob just stood there in the yard, their hands still locked together. Somehow the sunshine felt a little colder. The valley didn't feel quite as safe. We could just leave, Daniel said, real quiet like. Head further north. Find a place even more off the beaten path. Jacob turned to face him, a troubled look in his eyes. This is our home, Daniel. We built it with our own two hands, every single board, every fence post, every stone in that hearth. I ain't fixing to run. Me neither. Daniel stepped in closer, resting his forehead right on Jacob's chest. But I won't risk losing you. Not to some narrow-minded governor who thinks he knows how we ought to live our lives. Jacob's arms wrapped around him, strong and steady. We'll be careful. We'll be smart about it, but we ain't gonna hide who we are. Not all the way. This land here is ours, and nobody is gonna run us off of it. That summer brought a whole lot of tension right along with the heat. Twice, riders we didn't know passed on through, asking questions in town and poking their noses around the homesteads. And each time, Daniel and Jacob were careful, making sure they just looked like business partners and nothing more. It grated on him, having to hide the God's honest truth, having to pretend that Jacob's touch didn't set Daniel's whole world right. One evening, after a real tense run-in with one of them new deputies, Jacob was in a thundering foul mood. He paced that cabin like a trapped coyote. You could feel his anger in the air. "I just hate this," he finally burst out. "I hate having to pretend. Hate watching every word I say. And I hate seeing you get all tensed up every time a rider comes by." Daniel walked over to him and put both his hands flat on Jacob's chest. "I know. I hate it too. But it ain't gonna last forever. This governor fella, he won't be around forever. Tucker said he's already made enemies of half the men in the legislature. And in the end, meantime, we're hiding out like we're ashamed, like what we share is something dirty." Jacob's hands gripped Daniel's hips, tight enough to hurt. "But I am not ashamed. I love you, and that is nothing to hide. I love you too, and we are not hiding. Not really. We are just being careful. There is a big difference." Daniel pulled Jacob down for a kiss, pouring everything he could not say in town right into it. "No one can take this from us. Not a governor, not a deputy, not some law. This is ours." Jacob's coiled tension slowly eased, his hands becoming gentle on Daniel's body. "You are right. I know you are right. I just want to protect you. I want to protect what we have built, and you do, every single day." Daniel led him to the bed, pulling him down. "Now stop thinking about governors and deputies, and let me remind you what really matters." What followed was intense and possessive, both of them needing to reaffirm their bond, to prove that no outside force could ever touch what they had. Jacob took Daniel apart with his skilled hands in a demanding mouth, drawing out sounds from him that would scandalize the proper folks of this town, and Daniel gave in completely, trusting Jacob to put him back together again. Afterwards, lying in the tangled sheets, Jacob's hand traced lazy patterns on Daniel's skin. "If it comes down to it, if we have to choose between this land and each other, there is no choice to make. You are more important than any piece of ground." Daniel's eyes burned with unshed tears. "You are my home. The land is just the place we live. As long as I have you, nothing else matters." They fell asleep holding each other tight, and if their grip was a little stronger than usual, if there was a hint of desperation under the tenderness, well, neither of them said a word. The turning point came in late autumn. Daniel was in town getting supplies when he overheard two of the new deputies talking outside the general store. "Stone and his boy, that is who the governor wants us to focus on, says he is sure something unnatural is going on out there. We have got no proof. Tucker swears they are just business partners. Tucker is old and soft. The governor wants them run off or arrested. Does not much care which." Daniel's hands clenched around the bag of flour he was holding. He forced himself to finish his shopping, to act normal, but his mind was racing. They were being targeted specifically. The threat was no longer just some vague notion, but direct and right now. He rode home faster than was smart, nearly running his horse into the ground. Jacob was working on the new barn addition when Daniel came thundering into the yard. One look at Daniel's face and Jacob dropped his hammer. "What happened?" Daniel told him everything. Jacob's face grew darker with every single word, his hands clenching into fists. When Daniel finished, Jacob was silent for a long, hard moment. Then he said, "We fight. Jacob, we cannot fight the territorial government." "Watch me." Jacob's eyes were blazing with a cold fury. "I am not running. I am not letting them drive us from our home. And I am sure as hell not going to prison for the crime of loving you." "So what do we do?" Jacob's jaw set in that stubborn line Daniel knew so well. "We get ahead of this. We go to the territorial capital. We find allies. There have to be other people like us, people who will stand with us. And we make enough noise that the governor learns not to come messing with us again." It was a huge risk, downright dangerous. But as Daniel looked at the sheer grit in Jacob's eyes, he felt a little hope catch fire in his chest. "All right then, we'll fight." They headed out the very next morning after making arrangements with a neighbor to watch over the homestead. That ride to the capital took 5 long days, and with every single mile, Daniel's worry just grew. They were walking straight into the lion's den, but Jacob's steady presence beside him gave him courage. The territorial capital was bigger than any town Daniel had ever laid eyes on, just bustling with folks attending to commerce and politics. Jacob led him to a boarding house on the edge of town, one that Tucker had recommended as being run by people with some forward-thinking views. The woman who ran it, a Mrs. Chen, took one good look at him and smiled. "Let me guess, y'all heard about the new governor's crusade?" Jacob nodded. "We were told you might be able to point us towards some folks who could help." Help, fight, it's all the same thing these days. She led them into a private parlor. "There's a meeting tonight. Folks are organizing some resistance to some of the governor's more extreme policies. Y'all should come." The meeting was held in the back room of a restaurant, and Daniel was plumb shocked to see nearly 30 people gathered there. Men, women, some who were clearly like him and Jacob, others just playing against government overreach. A lawyer stood at the front, laying out a strategy. The governor is trying to push through laws that would criminalize what he's calling moral degeneracy, but his definition is so broad it could be used to target just about anyone. We got to fight this in the legislature, in the courts, and in the press. Jacob stood up then, and every eye in the room turned to him. "My partner and I, we've got a homestead up north. We've heard tell we're being specifically targeted. What is it we can do?" The lawyer studied them for a moment, then gave a firm nod. "Tell your story. Let folks see you're not monsters, just men trying to live your lives. The governor's power comes from fear and plain old ignorance. We fight that with truth and by being visible." Over that next week, Daniel and Jacob met with legislators, gave interviews to newspapers that were sympathetic, and connected with other folks fighting similar battles. It was exhausting and terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. They weren't alone. There were others like them, others willing to stand up and fight for their right just to exist. The governor even tried to have them arrested on some trumped-up charges, but that lawyer got him released within hours. That whole incident made all the newspapers painting the governor as a tyrant, using the government's power to persecute citizens over personal prejudice. By the time they got back home, the political winds had shifted. The territorial legislature had gone and rejected most of the governor's proposed laws. The press was openly mocking his obsession with people's private lives. And while the danger hadn't passed completely, it had surely diminished a whole lot. Jacob and Daniel stood right there on their porch, looking out over the land that truly felt like it was theirs again. Daniel leaned into Jacob's side, worn out but triumphant. "We did it. We actually stood up and fought back. And we won. We sure did." Jacob's arm came around his shoulders. "And we'll keep on fighting. Every time someone tries to tell us we don't belong, every time they try to take what's ours, we will stand our ground." Daniel turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become his entire world. "I used to think strength meant being all alone, dependent on no one. But I was so wrong. Real strength is this: standing together, fighting together, building something worth defending together." And Jacob kissed him, slow and sweet and just full of promise. Together, that is the only way I would ever want to do a single thing. As that sun started dipping low behind the mountains, painting the whole sky in streaks of gold and fiery red, a feeling finally settled deep in Daniel's chest. It was peace, all right, but there was a whole lot of pride in there too. They had fought tooth and nail for the right to love each other right out in the open, and bless their hearts, they had won. Their story was not just about getting by. It was about truly living, about refusing to hide in the shadows, about planting their flag and claiming their own piece of the world. And that night, as Jacob held him close, whispering words of love and forever, Daniel knew for a fact that whatever troubles came next, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else, side by side, together.